Catherine and I are here to talk about our Activate initiative, which is an open source, public-private partnership bringing designers together with communities to revitalize underutilized public urban space. So that's a mouthful, but what does it exactly mean, and how does it happen? Well, click. There we go. So in 2010, Architecture for Humanity Chicago launched the Activate competition, and the first step to that competition was identifying the site. Chicago has a public urban space problem in that there's a lot of it and it's underutilized, be it vacant lots or underutilized public lots. Oh. So the first step after identifying a site is mobilizing the design community. We launched an open source design competition. You're seeing the winning entry here from Moss Studio to bring together designers with the community and bring the best design possible to bear. We partner with community organizations, with other nonprofits, with neighbors, and with educational facilities to really see the project through. And then we realize the design as closely as possible to our partners, or our designers' vision, but also in partnership with our neighbors and community groups. And then from that, we advocate for stewardship. This is a wonderful success story following the execution of the 2010 Activate Design Competition. The neighbors were able to raise $100,000 and gain the right to occupy the space, and this is the community garden that sits on that space today. And then with all that success, we repeat. So Mark and Sean said, well, what about croquet hoops in a park and activating it for children's play? So we did it. Come on. There we go. Then we said, well, what if we had a slide to it? So we activated another play space with a slide and a vertical garden. And then we said, well, what if we take an abandoned street and turn it into a play space, a gym, an activity area? So we did that as well. And then finally we said, well, what if we take a community's history of art and turn it into display space, an extra canvas for the city?
And with such a successful history of tactical interventions and leveraging that, we were able to successfully win an RFP from the city of Chicago to develop, design, and lead the placemaking initiatives for the city on over 500,000 square feet of public space. So to scale, you see that area, but when we aggregate that and compare for the startup funding that is allowed, we are doing this for less than 9 cents per square foot. So think about that. That's less than a dime that we're getting of public funding to make a public space initiative for the city of Chicago. That little speck on the right isn't dust on the screen. It's actually the relationship between size and funding that we have. And we do that by looking at place as a platform, and we're building strategic partnerships with with organizations that we could find mutually beneficial relationships in these particular strategic areas that we're looking at. And we're looking at as well to start of developing a rapid prototype design system of developing easily implementable and cost-effective design solutions for neighborhoods to start to purchase and utilize on their public spaces. We're also looking at how can we decentralize the curator of cultures by bringing arts into and out of the neighborhoods for unique and small-scale experiences, and as well writing new policy to bring micro-retail to the public spaces so we could bridge that historic gap between startup and storefront that sometimes small entrepreneurs experience. And we've done this all within the last 2 months of our public launch. And so when we think about Activate, we see place as a platform, and we do this because we are citizens in and designers of our city, so we take on the challenge to define, design, and employ a new public space system.
Great, thank you. Gia.
Well, I have the luxury of having one of these spaces right down the street from my office in Chicago, so there's my disclaimer. Could you talk a little bit about perhaps the long-term sustainability model for some of these spaces? I've experienced in Chicago kind of the challenge in keeping that block club interested for the long term in the management.
One of the things that we're looking at, it's a 3-year contract that we have with the city, and so when we start from scratch, we mean it. We have to go from 50,000 to $1 million, and we do that. We have broad-based marketing and advertising rights. We have changed policy to allow for the micro retail to generate revenue, and then at the same time building partnerships so neighborhoods can build local stewardship, so that we could have the funding in place and then the skills in place, so that when we're done in 3 years, it could be handed over. Because failure isn't the sites taking a step back. It's about the whole entire thing stopping, and there's already natural energies around these public spaces. There were just a variety of policy or financial barriers that were stopping people from going ahead to do what they wanted to do already.
And it is about having strong community partners. It's less about it always looking like the designer intended it, and more about the community taking hold and owning it, and that's the only way it has sustainability.
Great, thank you.
If you were advising another city that was at ground zero with this work and wanted to advise them on how to enable this work, what would you tell them?
It really starts with the policy. So for example, if you wanted to have a 2-hour guitar performance on a plaza in Chicago, before we wrote 3 new pieces of policy. Before that, you had to fill out a 45-page application and submit it 60 days before your event. So you're spending at a minimum of 12 hours for a 2-hour performance, so that just stops. So looking at the policy, trying to find ways that you could streamline it, whether that's through a public-private partnership, which is what we have, which takes the risk away from the city in some ways, but then how can they start to leverage the city's additional networks to bring in funders or sponsors? So the same way a Bank of America funds the marathon, can we have the funder at that level to fund a public space within the city, and then find the right partner agency to possibly help steward it forward, whether that goes back to the original agency or it's a new non-for-profit, something along those lines. So giving flexibility to figure out what the right business model is during that time.
I was impressed with the logical process that you had followed, in particular the rapid prototype design system, and I'm wondering what metrics are you using to gauge success?
And that, yeah, this is great, and luckily we actually, the program and Activate program and then my firm were accepted into a fellowship program within Chicago, so we'll spend a year analyzing it with people much smarter. Not as smart as the panel, but smart in Chicago, of course. And then we'll start to develop some of those metrics. We have 7 areas that, as an architecture firm, that we particularly study, from health and wellness to culture to social impact, and that's how we gauge that against existing Chicago plans. So that's one way to do it. But for the rapid prototype system, we started to partner with folks within the construction industry. So for example, we're working with a concrete plant where their excess concrete can go into our forms to create benches for minimal to no cost. So if you could pick it up, you could have it. And that's one way that we pre-approve something and then get it on site much more quickly.
Can you talk some more about your partnership for this 3-year process, which seems to have grown out of AFH and your firm, and then how do you see that going forward after 3 years?
Sure. Well, I think the partnership is critical between Latent Design and Architecture for Humanity. We do work pretty fluidly and together, but Architecture for Humanity works in a lot of ways to develop the community partnerships and reach out and use our network of nonprofit organizations to help secure the community partnerships and programming. Latent Design takes a much bigger view, and it's a bit beyond AFH.
And thank you. Excellent.
That's what
Yeah,
I
great job.
Sorry. Thank you.